CEO Glow Show. So excited for today's episode. Okay, so listen, I'm always on the lookout for Christian beauty entrepreneurs that are just prime examples of the faith walk because entrepreneurship is the ultimate faith walk. And I wanted to bring in my friend, one of our students, Tasnique Prudhomme, to the CEO Glow Show. Every single time I have a conversation with her, it's always really impactful. And to be honest with you guys, I actually chose not to outline this episode. Typically what I do with guests is I send an outline previously, like the last one I just did with, Shane and Kendra. That was outlined just so that we have bullet points. But with Tasnique, I had plenty of time, but I purposely chose not to do that because I just wanted to leave room for the Holy Spirit. So Tasnique, I know that you are a wife, you are a mother of two with your third one in your belly and on the way. You were rated the top paramedical tattoo artist in your state in Louisiana, and it was all over the news. And so from everything that I know about you, you are a God-fearing woman, and it is so clear. So welcome to the CEO Glow Show.
Thank you so much, Sheila. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you. Thank you. I cannot wait. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your podcast today. And I'm so glad we're able to connect.
Oh, well, I am really excited to dive into this conversation. I feel like I'm going to learn a lot about you too, like in real time in front of everybody. So tell me about, first things first. Tell me about how you came to know the Lord.
Yeah, so my journey is actually pretty lengthy. I'm shortening it up as much as I can. I was raised Catholic, and it was nice. We went to, I'd done all my religions. We did the catechism, which was the religion classes, made my confirmation, my Holy Communion, all the way, through my confirmation. And then, it was good, but I always felt like there was something missing. And kind of rewind back to the beginning, my mom was very faithful to bringing us to church and things like that. The one thing that completely made me turn away from Catholicism was that I had a really, really bad experience as a child. I'm originally from Georgia. I'm a Navy brat, which means that we moved all over the states. We went from Georgia to Arizona, from Arizona to Louisiana. This is where my mom and dad's roots are. So we're originated from the Louisiana. The thing is that they didn't want me to, I guess they just wanted me to have the best education when I got here, because Louisiana is not really ranked the top #1 educational state. So they wanted me to continue with the education, the high quality education that I was given in the other states before moving to Louisiana. One of the things that they decided to do was put me in a private Catholic school. And which was okay, but this is where I experienced as a child. I was very young. I was about 6, 7 years old when I first started at the private school. And you don't remember, you don't forget things like this. So you remember things that happened to you as a child. I know a lot of people say like, oh no, or you're young, you might have made that up or you thought of it, but this really happened. And it impacted my life completely, especially my religious beliefs. So one of the things was she enrolled me into the private Catholic school. And little did I know that I was literally the only colored or African-American child or student in the entire school. The majority was, Caucasian white, but I was literally one of the minorities, literally the only one. This is where I experienced the most racism and discrimination. I've never, I wasn't exposed to it. I was very young. So that as a child, you don't understand why people are so ugly or so mean or why they're doing ugly things. And, I couldn't really comprehend it. But as I got older, I realized that, oh my gosh, I've actually experienced racism and discrimination at an all-time high. And it wasn't just from my peers, it was from the adults, the educators, the administrators. So this wasn't like, don't get me wrong. I think we all kind of go through the whole bullying thing where kids are not very nice. And I think mine just kind of was like times 3 because of the color of my skin and who I was as a person. But, that's one thing. But whenever the adults chime in and think that it's okay to treat someone with so much disrespect as a young child, is whenever, it starts to get a little weird. I was like, okay, this is not normal. I didn't experience this in Arizona, or, even with my family, walking down the street with my mom, going to the park, I still haven't experienced that. But being that it was a small private school, so population wasn't a big school, but just having that ongoing discrimination and constant bullying, not only with the children, but also with the adults, is whenever I just kind of like, okay, this is not love. When we think about love and the Lord, this was a place where I should have felt loved. We praise God, like we was going to mass. Mass was one of our electives. So like, you have your prerequisites and things like that. Even though I was in elementary at the time, we still had electives. And one of the days we had to attend mass. So it's not like we weren't learning about God. We were learning about it. We learned about parts of the Bible. We would read, talk about all the little stories in the Bible, because again, we're talking about like kindergarten and first grade. Okay. So of course we wouldn't be opening up the huge big Bible, but we'll go over the stories and things like that. And I could remember one time it was time for us to go to mass. And one of the things that they would let us do is walk side by side with an older student. And this person was like maybe in 5th or 6th grade. They would grab a partner and walk across the street. So the church was actually across from the private Catholic school. And it was on a busy road. So you had to like hold that person's hand. And I remember that I was the last to get picked. And the last student that was standing that needed to hold my hand to walk me across the street refused. And he did so in such manner where the teacher was just like, well, she can just walk by herself. So at that moment, I was terrified. They talked to us about looking both ways. Again, I'm talking about first grade, okay? Looking both ways. This was a busy street. So, for her to not even want to grab my hand to walk me down, she didn't. She left me at the back of the line, and she was just like, she got it. And they walked across. So yeah. I mean, but it goes to show you that, a lot of people like to tag themselves in religion so much. But, I haven't learned to my adult life that how much this played a big part of my faith, like a big, big part of my faith. When I thought like, well, why would God allow them to be so ugly when I'm in his home? I was in his chapel. I was in his world, like this was a private Catholic school. This is where we praise God. So why am I being discriminated? And the last straw with my parents, when they decided to completely take me out of this private school, I had an incident where a young girl, one of the students, had reported that I pushed her off of a swing. And so the teacher called me out of class and she said, hey, Taz, during recess, did you push this young lady off of the swing? And I said, no, I don't know her. I never, I didn't have friends. No one wanted to befriend me. So I played by myself. And don't get me wrong, one of the things that I really loved to do was swing. That was my way to get away. I felt like I was flying. So that was my way to just block everyone out. And I loved recess because that was my only time I can just have my own self to myself, where I can just block everyone out and I would swing so high. I really felt like I was flying. So when she mentioned swinging, I was like, well, I was on the swings today for recess, but I didn't push anyone. And I was never the confrontational type of child. I'm still like that today in my adult life. I'm not one to start any fights. I'm no bully. If anything, I'll be bullied, but then I learn how to stand up for myself later in life. But I was never one to pick any fights. So I was just like, no, I didn't. And she didn't believe me. So what she did was she made me go to the principal's office. Well, the principal's office was actually the priest, and the secretary or the assistant principal was our nun. So the nun, we called her the sister, and I won't say her name, but we called her sister for, and her name as the administrator. And that's who office I was in. So I stayed there for about 20, 30 minutes. And I waited, no one said anything. I was just sitting there, I told my truth, but they didn't believe me. And I was like, okay, so this is just, it's taking too long. So not even 5 seconds later, the child and the mother walks in. So this is not even, my mom was not called. My dad wasn't called. No one was called. The principal, which was our priest, was called in. So was the nun. And I just remember there was a lot of back and forth, and the adult, the mother of this child, was fussing at me like if I was not only her child, but also if I was just nothing. She was in my face, and they allowed this to happen. No one, no adult stepped in. She took me by my shirt, like literally, like, took me by my shirt, and she held me up, and she was like, "Don't you ever put your filthy hands on my daughter ever again." And at that moment, I cried. I mean, I was a kid. I'm getting goosebumps on talking
So
about it
you
because
didn't
it
do
gets me a
it.
little
You
emotional.
didn't do it, but
I
they
did not do it. And just to
did you
experience that, like I
say
wasn't one to
something
get
about
fussed
that?
at. I'm sorry.
Did you say something? Did you say I didn't do it?
Yes. So while I was crying, I actually had a great uncle that was a janitor there. He did all the cleanings, and just so happened, he knows I wasn't a troublemaker type of child or student. He passed the office. And when he noticed that I was kind of like back to back against like three adults staring me down, the other one is like constantly putting her finger in my face, he immediately just stopped, and like he came in and he was like, "Is everything okay?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, we're fine." And he, back then, we had those big like cellular devices, they were like huge. You had to pull up the antenna. So I remember him pulling it. Yes. He actually had it clipped to his waist, and I could see, like, literally, I could see him like pulling it out. And I'm like, "Oh, thank God, someone is," because at this point, as a child and being so young, I mean, we're talking about 6, 7 years old. I don't even know what to say because I was always taught to respect my elders, to not, get loud with adults, always stay in your lane as a child. And it was just something, my dad was in the military, and that he taught that was his disciplinary, always give respect. And so like, I didn't even know what to tell them. I didn't even know how to tell them to stop, because I mean, I'm crying and they're not stopping. They're constantly had their fingers. And I mean, like, I was not, even as a child, I wasn't like a destructive kid. So I never got, whippings, or I never got like really like, you know what I mean? Like, discipline in that manner. So to have an adult in my face and I'm crying and I'm letting know like, "Hey, you're hurting me," verbally and physically, because she still had her hand like in my shirt. Um, exactly. And you know what's crazy? We actually tried to fight this. So like, my uncle called my mom, told her what was going on. She worked about 45 minutes away from the town that we were in. So it took her a while to get there because they weren't answering the phones. At that moment, my uncle kind of stepped in, was just like, "You need to stop. Her mom is on her way." Like, "I'm not sure why y'all, putting your hands on a child." And he said, "Let alone, this is my great niece." And he was like, "And, I've been faithful to you guys as a worker. I'm the only janitor here, like, how dare you guys do something like this to a child, let alone someone that y'all know that is related to me? Like, I'm a good employee here, and you could have just called me, like, or call me in and say like, 'Hey, is this your niece? Maybe you should call her mom.'" He said, "Did y'all even reach out to her mother?" And they were just like, "Well, we were getting to that." And it was just so much a commotion. Like, to be honest with you, I can't remember everything that was said, but I just remember it was like back and forth in that manner. My mom finally showed up to school and immediately discharged me from the entire school. She did not let me go back. At that moment is when I started telling my mom the things that was happening to me. And because I was scared to tell her, and I was young, so I didn't know. So I told her how I didn't have friends. I told her how some of the boys were really, really ugly to me, and they would say racial slurs. Back then I would say the name of the slur on here starts with an N, but I would get that constantly. And my mom was just like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know, testing. I wish she would have said something earlier." But I mean, again, I was very young. But we did get pulled out the private school and got right into public, where I had relatives, I had cousins that I went to school with. So it was great. It was a great ending. I went off to high school and got into college. And from there, I kind of branched away from, when I got into college and I was able to make my own decisions with my religion, is where I branched off from Catholicism. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this, even though I had to continue to go to church, which was not the same church that the private school was utilizing. We were attending another Catholic church, like about a couple miles down. So I didn't see those people anymore. Like, I didn't even see the students, because that was the church that their families had belonged to, because it's such a small town. Everybody knows everyone, but so you get to pick where you want to go. So
circle back if we can to the first of all, I just want to say, like, I am so sorry you went through that as a baby. Like, I know you were preschool or whatever, but I have children myself, 2, 7, and soon to be 10 years old in October. But I am so sorry. And I want to circle back to that because I've had similar experiences. So actually, a couple things. So I just did a little bit of a deep dive into how half American and half Asian children were discriminated against so severely in Vietnam during the time of the war, because it was like tens of thousands of soldiers, had babies with Asian women in Vietnam because of the context of, like, that time and everything. If you were Vietnamese but you looked, mixed, if you looked half American, it was very easy to tell. So people who look like my children now, who are Caucasian, were discriminated against, and they also had racial slurs, that were for those types of children, and they were put in camps, and some of them were killed, and they were just ostracized. And so I just want to say I really feel for you to have to go through that as a child. And I also want to clarify a little bit, because I also grew up Catholic, and so I have a lot of Catholic friends and even team members that are Catholic, and I have come through discussion, I have come to understand, and not necessarily agree, but understand certain things that they do and why they do it. And I've just come to a better understanding of, like, why. And they've come to a better understanding of me being a Protestant and Christianity and our doctrines and how, it's through Jesus alone. And so with that said, I have been hurt also by Christians. I've been hurt by Christians. I've been hurt by Catholics. I've been plenty, right? So, but then something, I hear people say all the time, I think my pastor just said it, a couple Sundays ago. He says there's no social justice without spiritual justice. We know that. It's a societal issue also, but if we're going to have anything powerful, so powerful to eradicate the injustice of this, isn't this a spiritual issue? I mean, if everyone acted like Jesus did, this wouldn't be an issue. If everyone truly knew the God of the Bible, this wouldn't be an issue. Obviously, we'd still be human and we'd still, make mistakes. I see how that would speak volumes to me because my personal experience of Catholicism is not that it's all bad. There are certain things that I believe Protestants can learn from Catholics. There are, honoring some traditions, not just traditions, but some traditions and all. And confession is something that I have to agree that Catholics do better than us. They do. They have a practice of confession. And so, however, I do think that, the Catholic Church could use a little bit more education in terms of, like, knowing the word. If you take, like, a random Catholic and a random Protestant, who do you think what are the chances, like, that the Catholic would know more about the true word of God? And so I think that's where my personal hang up is I feel like they could do a better job at educating on what the word of God says. And so I do think it's well intended, but I think the manner in which things are carried out kind of robs people of that genuine conversion instead of like, oh, it's just tradition, you should convert at 14. I know it's not necessarily anything about the Catholic Church, but perhaps, just food for thought, if the people at that, private school, that Catholic private school, were more into the Word of God in a really genuine way, they say, judge a tree by its fruit. And if they had more gifts of the Spirit, I don't think that the Bible says that those characteristics that are so damaging would probably exist a lot less. And so I do understand that, your experience was probably more of a spiritual condition. So I see where you're tying that in. And I was raised Catholic, and I also not necessarily left the Catholic Church, I suppose you could say. And although I still visit sometimes, I think it's just a spiritual issue overall, and also even in the Christian church that I was hurt in, It was hard. It was really hard, right? And I've talked about it on this podcast. It's been really difficult too, just to experience that. And I had the same feelings as you. I thought, like, I'm supposed to be in your home. God, this is supposed to be your home. God, you told me these were your people. Why am I getting so hurt? Why are they treating me this way? And for me, it caused me to backslide. It caused me to be angry at God when if I just read my Bible more, right? If I just read it more, I would know, like, listen, Sheila, these are people. These are people, they're flawed people. Everyone will disappoint you. I won't disappoint you, but if you rest your peace on other people, on man, you will be hurt. You will get disappointed. Even like your spouse. You're supposed to care for me. You're supposed to be my be all and all. You're the one that vowed your life to me. And so I do think that there's a lesson there. And also it is kind of an indication of a spiritual condition. So I understand.
Definitely, definitely. Like I must agree that not all Catholics are bad. I did have a bad experience, but that was my foundation of faith. And that I would never run from,
Those formative years too, those formative years and are so important.
Right, right. I mean, they gave me a foundation. I knew how to pray, they showed me how to pray. They showed me how to attend church regularly, and like you said, confession was a big thing for the Catholic religion. And that's something that needs to be practiced a lot more, throughout all the religions. And I totally agree. Like that, I mean, no shade to any Catholic out there. This was just my experience, but my foundation was built off of Catholicism. And I would never erase that. And even when I'm talking to the Lord, like when I'm saying my prayers and I'm thanking him for everything he's done for me, I always thank him for allowing me to go through what I went through. Because if I would have not been as strong as I am in my faith today. And because of that, that was one of the questions when I was growing up in high school and, trying to get through that stage of puberty, trying to understand the world at this point, because I know I would be on my own in the next couple of years once I graduate high school and attend college. I didn't understand. So I would question the Lord and I would be like, now we know not to question, but back then I was very young, naive, and I would question like, well, why did this happen? I followed the steps that you've given me. I have not backdoored. I have not turned my back. And I think being that I was so young and I kept such a good tight like faith with the God, I didn't know in the back of my mind that I went through the discrimination. I went through all of that and it still stays with me to this day. It's a scar, it still stays with me to this day. I felt like all that might have happened, but I never detached from God. I've always been faithful, even as a child. Like, even after that all went, of course, I'm going to question. I'm young. I didn't know, but I never let go of faith. And I continue to be faithful to the Lord. I went through not only did I go through that, but right after my mom, got me out of that private school and put me into public school, which I thought like, oh, life is good now. I can go to school and make friends and do all these things. And which I was doing. My mom and dad filed for divorce. So that tested my faith once again, because right after that, I became a product of divorce, and it wasn't the easiest divorce. It was very, very difficult for both sides of the family, my mom and my dad. It was long and drawn out, one of those long drawn out divorces that we all wish not to have. But unfortunately, my mom did go through that. And that kind of also put me in another place, of space where I was like, okay, here we go again. I just got out of this. I'm reconnecting my faith with you, Lord. And then this happens. And it's like, oh my goodness. And here goes the custody and the fight and the joint custodies and just so much going on. I have an older brother. It's just two of us. So I just have one sibling, and he's a lot older than I was. So whenever my mom and dad did file for divorce, he was already completely out the house. So he had made his decision to go into service like my dad. And he was like going straight to boot camp and, do all his little thing in the Navy. And I was left home with my mom, who was like an emotional wreck. Like after the divorce, it was like so much emotions that, I mean, she stayed in a slump for years, having to deal with that on my own, trying to uplift my mom, trying to see light of it and tell her that it's going to be okay. Like as a young child, even there was a point where I literally picked my mom up off the floor because she was crying so much. It was something that my dad had called her about something, and she had just gotten to this really, really bad depression. And I would literally find her. I would come back from school and I would find her on the floor and I would have to pick her up because she was so hurt. It was the hurt. It was the pain. And this was a heartbreak that I personally didn't experience, but you see these on TV and it's like, you see the heartbreak, but they don't ever say what happens after the fact. And I promise you, I've experienced a heartbreak with my mom, going through the divorce. And because she loved my dad, she did not want the divorce. And I think knowing that as a child, knowing that I've even seen them in front of me where she begged for him to stay, that it's hurtful for me, for my mom. So just having to deal emotionally with her was very hard. I had to put my feelings to the side. I couldn't feel any type of way because I felt like if I were to say something, it might trigger for her going back into the slump again. So that was pretty difficult, so from going from discrimination straight into a divorce with my parents and then trying to get through school, I still managed to graduate top of my class. I still managed to keep the grades up because I knew that my mom didn't have the money. My dad pretty much was the breadwinner. He was the one that, host the entire family. Once he left, she was basically on her own and she was a housewife before the divorce. And now she had to go in with just a high school diploma. She didn't have any college, experience, nothing with college. She just was like, okay, I'm gonna just have to go work. I still have to support 2 children. And thank God my brother was a lot older than I was, where he was right out the door and it was just me that she had to take care of. But a lot of things changed. We got put on food stamp. I know, Dee talks about that all the time. We had to do WIC, and I experienced how that was, like going through lines, just waiting for the vouchers. Like, it was just a lot. It was a big flip. It was a 360 from the life that I lived before the divorce and the life that we entered after the divorce. At that moment, I was questioning God yet again, but I kept faith. And I was like, there's got to be a reason why you still have me here, Lord. Yeah. Like, there's got to be a reason why I have not broke. My spirit hasn't broke. I'm not slumping like my mom. I'm energetic. I'm still, every day I woke up and I felt like I had a purpose and I knew that I had to be there for my mama. So I was like, I got you, Mom, whatever you need. So like my first job ever, I was 13 years old and I got paid to work at a concession stand and keep the gate at a baseball park. And they were paying, being I was so young, they would pay me out of pocket. So I was only getting $3.50, but it was enough to cover whenever my mom couldn't. So I would save and I would just be like, okay, here you go, Mom. This is all I have, and if it needs to pay bills, then she'll take it. But if it didn't, she was like, no, just keep it for yourself and you can go buy whatever you want to buy, Tasnique. And so that was the thing. And we had that little relationship and it hurt her to see me work so young, but that's all we had. So I made it work and I worked from 13 all the way through high school. At different locations, of course. At 13, I kind of let that go. I think when I hit 15, I was done with the baseball park. But at that moment, I was of age to get an actual good paying job where I could help my mom a little bit more. And then off to college. So at that moment, I still had that faith in God, even though we went from the discrimination to the divorce to the emotional roller coaster I had with my mom, up to college, where now I had to learn how to love me. Because at this point, I was trying to find who I was after people being so ugly and so disrespectful at a young age. I didn't understand why the kids did not like me. So that it took me a while to understand connection with other children of my age. And then going through an emotional roller coaster with my mom and being there for my mom, I couldn't really find Tasnique. Like I was like, who? Like I'm not worried about her right now. I need to get my mom where she needs to be. So when I got to college, it was like, okay, now I can find Tasnique. And at this moment, I didn't know who I was. Like, to be honest with you, I just knew I was going to college to get a nursing degree. And, that was it. But I went to college and my first conviction happened. Never in my life have I experienced a conviction. But after all the trials and tribulations that the Lord had me go through from my childhood experience all the way up to college, I thought life was great. I did everything that any freshman would do in college. I got into the classes, I made friends. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm connecting. And it was so much fun. I would go to the parties. It was so nice. And then I had a good friend that was like, hey, have you thought about pledging? And I was like, pledging? What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, don't you have any relatives? Or I'm sure someone might have told you about sororities and fraternities, right? And I was just like, oh, I said, yeah, I looked into it. I do have a couple relatives that have, pledged their self to an organization like a sorority. And they're like, well, you ever thought about doing it? So I actually reached out to the relatives who had pledged and kind of had conversation with them. And I just remember them telling me, pretty much painting a beautiful picture, like saying, yeah, it's networking, it's a sisterhood, this and that. Right. And I was like, oh, cool. This is what I want. This is what I've been wanting. Like, what you mean? I want to make the connections because I didn't think people liked me. So yes, let me make all the connections that I can. So went ahead and found this sorority and start to go to their programs and just be attentive to them. And I did the whole rushing process of what people call the rush, or they'll call initiation process, where they picked, they weed out everyone and they picked the group. And I was one to get picked out of like 200 girls, and it was only 45 of us to get picked. So it was very competitive, but I was lucky to be a part of it. And I was so happy, and I made connections. I made good friends, but something was always like hovering over me, like almost like a dark cloud. That same feeling that I got years ago with the discrimination of all the kids. I felt like even though I belonged to this sisterhood, so-called sisterhood, it still didn't feel like I was accepted. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand that. So like, going through this, I tried my best. I tried to really stand out. I even, put myself on panel. Like I wanted to be a part of their full panel with the president, the treasurer, the secretary. I stayed committed to it all my entire undergrad life in the college experience. And I mean, we did everything, they talk about it being a part of serving the mankind and doing everything you need to do as a person, giving back. I'm thinking this is great. I'm in a good organization, but I just felt empty. And I was like, oh my goodness, like what is this? So I never questioned it. Come my senior year in nursing school, I flunked out. Okay. I flunked out of nursing school, and it was my senior year, but it's not because it was the educational part. It was because I was a victim of the fall 2016 flood in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had a hurricane, and it completely flooded out our neighborhood where the school was, the university was. And I lost everything, my vehicle, my apartment, everything in my apartment, my scrubs for clinicals. I lost everything. So now we're going through I'm like, okay, Lord, like finally I get about 3 years of my life back, and I'm going through this again, and I had no money. My mom had no money. No one could fund me anything at the time. They didn't have the GoFundMe. That wasn't very popular at the time. And I remember going to the dean of nurses, and I was like, who was also in the same sorority as I was in. And she was just an older woman, and she worked at the nursing school. And so I just remember her saying, I walked in and I was like, I was a victim of this. I'm just naming her everything. And I was like, please, can I please get a second chance to be in school? This is my senior year. I'm supposed to be walking across the stage in the next few months in fall. At this time, it was spring. And she was just like, well, to say that you are in this organization, you should be, your grades should be good. Like there shouldn't be no reason for me to have to push you through. And I was like, no, it's not that. It's not the grades. It's the fact that I'm going to get zeros because I have no transportation. I have no clinical clothing. I have no books. I've lost everything. And the only thing she could tell me was, oh, well, everyone was a victim of the flood. So if the other students can do it, so can you. And I was like, kept repeating like, ma'am, I have nothing. So unfortunately, I had to drop out. So I dropped out of nursing school, which that did everything. I've reached out to the sorority to see if they can help me in any way because it's supposed to be one big sisterhood and all this other stuff. And they did not. No one did. They never even called to see if I was okay. They never asked like, Taz, do you need a place to stay? Like I literally stayed with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband. Thank God the Lord showed me that was going to be my husband because he saved me from a lot of things. Like not having a place to go or stay. His family lived pretty close to the university, and he was like, well, instead of you going back to your mom, I'm going to ask my parents, because we were still in our own parents' households, you know? So he was like, I'm going to ask my parents if you can stay with us. He said, just so that you can get through school or figure out what you're going to do. And I was like, great, like, thank you so much. And so that happened. And then from there, I never went back to college until later. But from there, my husband and I, we got married. We kind of put school off the side, and I was like, look, I'll finish, you know, when the good Lord gives me the money, I'll finish. But as of now, we're just going to put it on hold. So we wound up getting married. We bought our first house, and that's, you know, that was it for nursing for a little while. But once you get initiated into these sororities and fraternities, you're always a part of the sorority and fraternity. So I just want to kind of leave that with you, Sheila, because a lot of people think that, you know, like once you graduate, you're done, but you're not, because at the end of the day, you're still a part of their sorority. It takes levels to get out. So didn't even know that. Okay. But just want to put that in the ears of our audience so that they can kind of understand how these organizations work. So, you know, having went back to school, I had decided, I was like, you know what? I think it's time for me to re-enroll and get a degree. But I don't know if it's going to be nursing, because I don't have the time nor the money to start completely over. So I said I might just, you know, use nursing as a concentration, which I did, and to get a health degree in science for it. So I enrolled and everything. And so now all my entire organization, everybody that was a part of it, was like, look, Taz is back, you know, she's back in, because as long as you're in school, you're still considered to be somewhat active, but you do have to pay dues too. So if you pay your dues, you're back active again. So that's how it works. So now that I had re-enrolled into the university, I was now still an undergrad to them. So at that moment, I was invited back to the parties. I was invited back to the gatherings. It's because these organizations put on things all the time, like events. And I remember it was my 10-year sorority anniversary. And I kid you not, I had just had my second baby boy. And I remember, and this is where the conviction comes in. I remember sitting in my mother-in-law's yard, and we were right by the trampoline, and we called it the family trampoline because all her grandkids go and jump on the trampoline. And that was just something that, you know, we'll stop our house and jump on the trampoline and mingle and talk to them. But I just remember her saying, oh, you know, you can let Axel, who's my oldest, jump on the trampoline, and, you know, we'll come sit outside with you, Tess, so we can watch him. So I had my newborn strapped to me, like the little mommy kangaroos that you strap, of course, because he couldn't jump. So like I had him strapped to me, and I was on a launch chair. And then I had my sister-in-law who had came stop to visit. She was on another chair, and my mother-in-law. So we were all just sitting around the trampoline while my oldest one jumped, and we were talking. And I remember my sister-in-law was talking about Bob Marley. And this is where the faith of God rained on me. And you know, when they tell you that you're blind sometimes, like, you know, you're blind until he opens up your eyes so you have the eyes to see. And so, like, I didn't know none of this. You know, I knew it was my 10-year anniversary. I couldn't wait to be with my girls on Friday. This was a Monday, by the way. Friday was the day of the actual anniversary party. So we had a dinner. We had like all kinds of stuff they had planned for us. But I couldn't wait. I had paid all my money. I mean, it was like thousands of dollars, but I paid all my money. And I was just like, you know, I can't wait to mingle with the girls again, get to know everyone again, let them know what's been happening in my life. And here she come talking about Bob Marley. And I'm like, okay. So she's talking about Bob, and she mentions that she had read an article where Bob was in a cult. And she said that it's crazy because, like, this cult, when he tried to detach from the cult, they didn't technically allow him to detach. So it just kind of, you know, like, now that I think back on it, like, man, it gave me similarities of, you know, cult-like type of organization. So that didn't dawn on me just yet. So at that moment, I'm just listening to her. I'm watching my boy on the trampoline, making sure he doesn't hurt himself. And she says something about, yeah, and they believed in, once they die, they are now behind a wall. So that is when things just stopped. And when I mean stop, I had an out of body experience. So it wasn't just a conviction. It was like a vision conviction. So at this moment, I'm sitting in the launch chair But baby is no longer attached to me. There's no baby. There's no one around. At this moment, when she said those words, I felt like I was in a whole nother realm. You know, we talk about realms as Christians, and I don't think we understand that there are spiritual warfare outside of us that we can't see. And I feel like there are realms, you know, we hear them all the time. And, you know, like I felt like I was in a realm. Like I just never experienced something like that in my life, but I was literally in my sorority house.
Wow.
I kid you not. So the baby wasn't there. The trampoline was gone. The relatives was gone. The in-laws, no one was there with me. I was by myself.
Oh,
and
wow.
I watched myself in
I just
2000 when
I just did. I didn't put it together before that, so I just did it. Okay.
yes. Yeah. So like I like where I was, which was 2021 was my 10-year anniversary. This realm, this vision that I had put me back in 2011 when I rushed, like when I crossed. And one of the things that I remember, it was just so hot. And I watched myself pledge. I watched my line sisters walk and pledge. And I'm watching me and I see that our heads are down, we're holding hands and we're chanting. And when I think about it, I'm like, man, in 2011, I had no idea what I was saying. And, you know, they don't really
what were you saying?
what you're saying.
What were you
So
saying?
that's the thing. So it's a Greek organization. So we chanted Greek words. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know what they meant. So they teach you these Greek words and you just chant them. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I think the way they do the rushing process is so that you don't remember these things. I kid you not. So they do everything all in one and they make you wake up like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and you do the pledging and the going through the whole rush thing, and they implant so much information within that one day. And then they make you practice it throughout the entire day until it's time to perform it. So at this moment, no one dared to ask questions, you know, because it was just crunch time, you know, like there was no time to do anything. So I don't know what I was chanting. That's and I still can't even tell you. I can't even remember. I just remember it being Greek. And like, if I were to go try to look it up, I don't even think I would even make sense of it. Cause I really tried to look up Greek words to put it all together. And it was like so out of context, like English context. Like it was so out to where it's like, okay, there's subliminal messages here and I can't pick them up. Like, you know, right. So I never tried to go back to see what they meant. But I remember chanting and we were singing hymns and humming songs and just very, very cult-like, you know. Now I'm looking at myself get this. I just remember being extremely hot and I was getting flushed and it was my turn to go up. So I watched myself go up to the altar, their altar, and I remember kneeling.
Was it called an altar?
It was an altar with our symbols. So it was an altar. It was an altar, almost like a church altar. It was an altar. And I went up to the altar and I kneeled like I was told to. And I kept my eyes closed like I was told to. And I bowed my head like I was told to. And there was not the president. So we call them different Greek names. But basically you're almost like, not your priest, but I guess your hierarchy, I would say, let's just say president. So like your president of the organization comes in, says something over you. And then after that, she then allows you to sign the book. So mind you, this is definitely not the book of life. So anywho, I remember getting handed a red pen and signing my name in the book. And this was a full-blown sacrificial ritual, right? So anytime, and I say sacrificial because a lot of Christians kind of like, what you mean sacrifice? What did y'all have to sacrifice? Yeah, but we pretty much sacrificed our souls. Like that's exactly what we did. And we did it in a blood signature. So what I mean by blood signature, the symbolism was in the red pen. It's a blood signature. It's with the red pen. So I signed my name in the book with the red pen. So a lot of things nowadays I'm talking about right now, modern, things are not done like it was back then. Back then, they would have pricked your finger, you sign in a blood signature. Where in the modern days, there's symbolism. So there's a lot of symbols that just raised the biggest red flags. And I never knew that because I wanted to be a part of a sisterhood. I wanted to be accepted because I lacked that. I lacked that as a child, and I just wanted to be accepted, and I wasn't. And and it's crazy because like after I experienced all that, watched myself kneel at the altar, sign my name, I can remember just crying, like me physically crying. Then I'm back on the lawn again in front of the trampoline. My sister-in-law, they were like, Taz, are you okay? Are you okay? And at this time, they knew something was wrong. Like they knew something was wrong. And at that moment, I was like, well, so they basically told me, they were like, Taz, you okay? You okay? Because basically, I guess what I felt was like 20, 30 minutes in this realm was only like a couple seconds with them.
Wow.
And they were like, you kind of blanked out. We was trying to figure out what was going on. We were talking to you. You weren't responding. Like, are you okay? And I was like, at this moment, I couldn't even catch my breath. Like, I kid you not. Like, I was still crying. Like, I was crying, and they're like, you're fine. I finally calmed down to let them know like what was going on. Yeah. And my sister-in-law, who had her own trials and tribulations with the Lord, had completely given her life to God. And she said, Taz, what you're telling me sounds like you experienced some type of conviction that the Lord wanted you to see. And she said, all I can tell you, my sister, is to go home and go pray. She's like, you need that time with God. She said, he's trying to tell you something. And, I can't tell you, my mama can't tell you, Ken, my husband, won't better tell you. She said, this is between you and the Lord. And she said, and it's sacred, that's your conviction. And she was smiling, and I was like, what are you smiling for? But, the convictions are so, oh man, I can't even express it, what the feeling that you get. So like right when I got home, I broke down and I cried. But when I tell you, it was tears of happiness, and not, I didn't feel like I was leaving a part of my life. I just felt like, I'm happy, I'm joyous, but I'm crying. And it was just that liberation. Like it was crazy. I can't even, if I were to relive that again, I can't. So at that moment, after a while, when I calmed down, when I got home, and I just kind of, got myself back together again, and, was breathing through the process, I started questioning myself again. I was like, well, maybe I didn't experience that, like maybe I was just tripping, like I was like, maybe I was just, maybe I ate something that I wasn't supposed to, have eaten. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't drinking at the time. I had completely given up alcohol, because I had started my faith journey. Mm-hmm. So I completely had given up alcohol, and I was like, heck it, like I'm still going to go and party with my line sisters, my sorority sisters on Friday, because it was my anniversary. So I remember my husband coming back home, and he was like, Taz, like, are you still going to do it? You kind of, April, which is my sister-in-law, kind of mentioned that you had a little experience, and it was with the sorority. Are you sure you want to go to this thing? And I was like, I'm fine. I said, I'm going to go, because to be honest with you, I don't think what I experienced, I think I might have just been daydreaming, like something is wrong. So at that moment, that was it. I haven't talked about it, didn't breath a word to anybody about it. I didn't talk to my mom about it. No one. I barely, I didn't even want to look it up. I just wanted to be in my own cubicle and just mind my own business and do my own thing. So I was like, I'm not going to worry about it. If this is truly God, he'll present himself again. So went to my anniversary. Straight to Baton Rouge, went to my anniversary. And we were having dinner. So it was late at night, we were having dinner. And I remember had a great time with my line sisters. Haven't seen them in years. It's been 10 years. Haven't seen them, and had a great time. I actually chose to leave early because I had a test. So I was already enrolled into the online program to finish off my degree. And I had a test the next day. So I was like, hey girls, I'm calling it a night. I have a long way to drive. And then right when I get home, I'm going to study a little bit for my test on tomorrow. So they all wished me good luck, gave me hugs. We cried a little bit, and I had a blast, Sheila. At that moment, I was like, it wasn't God, like good. These girls they're here for me. And, we're going to do what we got to do. Like I'm going to make sure that we stay connected and this and that. Go home, open my book to study. And I'm studying for like 3 hours straight. So this is like from 1 o'clock in the morning till about 3. my phone had died. So I charged it while I was studying, and I didn't want to play on my phone, no distraction, right? I wanted to get the job done of me studying and passing my test. So I was like, okay, let me just take a little break. It's been 3 hours. Let me power up my phone. So 3 o'clock, everyone's sleeping in the house. My husband's out. My babies are out. And right on, cut it on. And the first thing that pulls up on Instagram is a freaking YouTube ad that says, I won't say the organization because I'm in the process of denouncing. So I'm kind of in legal things right now. So I do have this talking script, but it says, this sorority girl has denounced her letters for the Lord Jesus Christ. And I was like, what? Like, okay, first off, my phone was dead the whole entire time. So no algorithm could have picked that up. I never went look it up. I never, I know we have satellites that watches and listen, but it just, I didn't do any searching, no researching.
Maybe it was just God. Or maybe it was just God.
Yeah. So maybe it was just God. So I was like, oh. And so I immediately clicked it. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to click it. It's got to be him. I'm going to click it. So I clicked it. And this girl is like pouring out a very similar situation as mine, where she was brought into another realm, watched herself pledge, and realized the things that the Lord was unveiling for her. And she was just going over and over again. And then from there, you know how you can like minimize it and see all the similar videos that's just like hers. There were millions of women and men around the entire world denouncing their letters, denouncing their sorority and fraternities for God. And I said, well, what? This just can't just be me. Like, this has to be, this is a thing, So I immediately opened up her YouTube, listened to her story, very similar to my experience. Not only that, she took the time to go get our ritual book. So we are given a ritual book. Inside the ritual book tells you that the full version is on Google, where you have to be a member because we're all given a certain identification number, almost like a social security number. Because once you become a part of this organization or any sorority and fraternity, you are now, like I said, it takes levels to get out of this type of organization, but you are now branded with them, basically. So you are indebted with them. So I typed in, my identification letters as what she was doing too on YouTube. And I watched her, how she went to the virtual book, and she opens up our ritual, book, and she's reading. Now in one hand, she has the Holy Bible, and she's opening up the Bible, and she says, let me tell you how we have been deceived. We have been deceived, my sister. Let me show you how we've been lied to. So at that moment, she's reading the scriptures, and in the scriptures, they took the word God out and replaced it with the sorority name. So they took actual scriptures in the Bible, stuck it in their ritual book, and replaced every word of Jesus and God. Completely took it out.
They do that in Korea too. From what I understand, they replaced the Bible, and
yes,
they did it in North Korea.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and honestly, it's been happening for years, like this is something that's been happening for way longer than way longer than since I pledged, because these other similar videos, they dated back to like the early 2000s. So like these people have been denouncing for a while, and the organization is just so big and so powerful. You don't hear the stories of people leaving the organization for God,
let's talk about the definition of what a cult is, because I think we have some people that might be watching that are like,
so I say cult like, because like, I say cult like, to be honest with you, my definition,
go ahead. What's your definition?
So like my definition of a cult is to be in some type of organization or some type of group or club, or we'll just say organization that allows you to do certain things, certain rituals. That's what I think of. That's my version of cult, of a cult. It's like something that you have to.
I just looked it up in the dictionary, and so
go ahead and read it.
Cult is a noun, a religion regarded as unorthodox or spurious. A great devotion. Second definition is a great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work. A system of beliefs and ritual. a form of religious federation, worship, a system for cure of disease based on dogma set forth by its wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. But so a cult, I completely understand what you went through, and I feel for what you went through, because we are beings that need belonging. We are relational beings. We weren't built that way. And even if you're not a believer, you worship something. Everyone worships something. The only choice you get is what to worship, because we are that need to worship something or to love something and to belong in a community is so ingrained within us for a reason. If you do not worship God, you worship something, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be yourself. And even though you maybe say like, well, you're worshiping the sorority or whatnot, it still boils down to what you want. What's going to make Tagmeek feel good? What's going to make Sheila feel good right now? What's going to feel warm and yummy? It's just yourself. And that might bring about some happiness during a time, but it's not blessed. I do think that at some point it's going to run out. It's like a bucket with a hole, right? So it's like,
right, I agree.
Fine for a little while, but then
it'll be fine for a little while.
That's kind of like how I feel about self-help stuff. Like, it's fine, it's good, it's, hard work pays off and all this stuff, and like, yeah, go get them. But I do think that at some point you're gonna need more substance, and you will have questions. You should have questions, actually.
Right.
Why is this? And it'll run out, and then all of a sudden you'll be in this place where like, why doesn't this fill me anymore? And so I do think that, God is the ultimate Xanax, the ultimate acid.
I agree.
And so
I agree.
Yeah. And so this is the first time I'm hearing about this. I know you mentioned it a little bit to me at the mastermind, but this is such a powerful story. So
it is.
Let's talk about, what are some things that you would want the listener to watch out for? Because we're all probably like beyond the college age. What are some things that, we should watch out for in terms of like, am I in a cult? I'm doing by years. Like, am I in a cult? And is my worship going to something, that will give me meaning in the long run? Worship the Lord's, or what? How else do we have these like cultish things that we do?
Right. And something, Sheila, that I think that's something that it's a personal thing, and I feel like this can happen to anyone, and it doesn't have to necessarily be like a sorority or fraternity. There are religions out there that are cult-like, and what we think we're worshiping, like when we're thinking that we're worshiping all mankind, not worshiping, but, helping all mankind, worshiping in the eyes of the Lord, sometimes it can be deceitful because the organization may have a back into it. You're thinking that you're getting into something great. People are very nice to you. They befriend you.
Oh, they're nice to you.
My advice to the listener who has gotten to an organization, if you're pledging something, there's key words that we have to kind of stray from. If you pledging yourself to something, then we know that in the Bible, the Lord speaks ill will on pledging yourself to something, because our pledge and our allegiance is to Him, not to an organization, not to an idolistic object or thing, not to an idolistic person, our organization, when I say this again, this is way bigger than just the sororities and fraternities. This is happening even in your mega churches, even in your big religions that, they do the conspiracy gospel, or they'll do the money God. We all call it the money gospel, but it's like if you come up to the altar, prosperity. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. I was just about to say that. Thank you for the word. Yes, prosperity gospel. We have to be very careful as Christians. We have to be, because sometimes, we battle flesh and spirit all the time. There's a warfare around us all the time. And as much as I pray, as much as I get into the Bible with my fellow friends around the area, at the end of the day, we all deal with flesh. Flesh is going to always be the epitome of our spirit. So at this moment, we do have to make the discernment of which line we want to fall on. So the only thing that the Lord asks us not to is to ride the line. You either gray or you're white. You're either black or you white. Like, and then what I mean by that,
clear about that. I mean, you're either for
yeah,
me or you're against me. And in
you
Matthew
either for me or
17,
against me.
16, it says,
Right.
the Bible says, beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. And Bible says you can identify them by their fruit. And that is
Right.
by the way they act. You know, you can
By
take
the way they
grapes
act.
from thorn bushes or figs from thistles. And
Correct.
the Bible does warn us about false prophets. The Bible also tells us that, you know, that in the community of God, you belong. You belong to Him. In Isaiah, it says, you are mine. And so I have a cup that says, you are mine with that verse from Isaiah. And it's just a good reminder that, you know, you are His daughter.
Right.
Daughter, speak to God like, you know, remember that He's your heavenly Father. You know, and a lot of listeners might be thinking, like, I have a good dad, but yeah, you did. Oh my gosh, I saw this super powerful. The internet has been so good for Jesus. I really think so. My mom
Right.
knows what I love. So I
Yes.
saw this woman. She was getting married and she had an absent father her whole life. And so during her father and daughter dance, she chose to get on her knee and worship. It was so amazing.
That is amazing.
Isn't that beautiful?
I know that's right. Yes, that is beautiful. And I agree, Sheila. Like, you know, at the end of the day, the Bible does tell us that. And it's all about your discernment. You know, like I used to condemn myself. So there's a difference between condemnation and conviction. When I experience conviction, that's experience I will there's no I can not say I can never relive it. I mean, if he wants to give me the conviction again, then I'll be reliving it again. But it's just there's no way you can erase that feeling, the type of feeling that I got when I found out that I was a part of this organization, and I had devoted myself to God at this moment. And you know, I didn't even know that it was from the enemy, you know, like I had no idea. But see, the enemy comes as a disguise. He always wants to be like God. So he took our Holy Bible and was like, let me just take the verses and replace it with a sorority name so that y'all know that I am still trying to be like God. And you're going to say these rituals until you get tired, you know, and you're not going to know what you're doing because I'm going to make sure that it's glitz and glam around you so that you're distracted. And distraction is a big thing too. So a lot of times, if you're listening right now, a lot of times when you are put in, if you want to be a part of an organization or you want to be part of this club or be a member of something, and it's glitz and glam all around it, they're asking for money, they're doing this and they're doing that. That's not God. You know, he provides for you regardless. So that it's not God, you know, but we get blindsided, we get distracted with all the glitz around the area. And we forget like what we're really signing up for. Like, you know, we forget to even rethink while we're doing this, you know, and for me, it was for connection. But I guess the Lord was like, you know what, your connection doesn't lie within this organization because you're better than this. You are my daughter and you will hear me out, which he totally, I mean, yanked me from that organization in such ways, but I praise him for that. It's been a long time. Let me tell you, it's been hard for me to talk about this because these organizations are so entwined with a lot of big other organizations. So, and I say that because I'm just speaking kind of like in code here because I don't want no one to get canceled, okay? Because I'm still in a little legal battle. But oh wow, so yeah, so I got to be careful with my words. So like what I mean by that they're tied in with bigger organizations that we know of today that worship more of the enemy than God itself. And what they do is they put on a glam type of spotlight on these organizations, making it okay for the innocent to sign up for it, you know? And it's easy to capture it. And it's easy. I was easy. I just wanted connection in a sisterhood.
Young girls will feel like to belong. And so I just want to remind you guys, if you've ever experienced, you know, this type of conviction, that there is no condemnation for those who belong to Jesus Christ. And so I do think that it's really significant where you sign your name. Who do you belong to? You know,
that's right.
If that book does not belong to the Lord, I don't want any part of it. And so as believers, especially, you know, God wants you to repent, but he doesn't want you to condemn yourself, because there is no condemnation if you belong to the Lord. So let's talk about those differences. Like, when you're convicted, it's from God. When you feel condemned, it's from Satan.
That's right.
Leads to more life. Like, it doesn't feel like a death, and condemnation leads to despair. When you're convicted about something, it's a joyful thing. Condemnation ends in sorrow. You know you're being convicted because you're motivated to change. But when condemnation, you know you're in condemnation because it makes us think we can't. And that's not God talking to you. That's the enemy.
That's right.
And also in terms of like identity too, you know you're condemning yourself, or Satan is telling you to condemn yourself when you tie your identity to that sin. But conviction leads to a new identity in Christ. You know, conviction looks to Jesus, condemnation looks to yourself. That's how you can tell whether you're being led by the same spirit or you're listening to the lie with the enemy. And so if you are in a hyperloop of condemnation, don't let the enemy get a foothold. Pray for God to release you of that condemnation. Rebuke that spirit that's telling you these lies. I mean, is the Bible real or is the Bible real? Like, are you a Christian or are you a Christian? Did God lie when he said that there is no condemnation for those who belong to Jesus, or was he making it up? So, you know, I totally get what this is like. I've experienced this in my life too, where I, you know, take a past sin or even a current sin, you know, and I make it like, this is me, this is my identity. But conviction, and with conviction with the Lord, we have hope. So I want to encourage you guys to be about that. We are running a little bit out of time, but this was so amazing. Thank you so much.
It was beautiful.
For sharing your story.
Thank you.
A lot of little that here now that I want to dive into. I want to go into a YouTube rabbit hole on sororities. And then listen, for those of you who are like, I was in a sorority, it wasn't like that, I loved it. You know, we're only speaking from our personal experiences. I'm sure there's Christian sororities too, so, you know, that honor the Lord. But, you know, I hope that, you know, this conversation reveals in what ways we've been disobedient and turning to things of this world for our peace, for our belonging, for, you know, for assurance of our future and not of.
Right. That's beautiful.
Where can we follow you and how can we work with you?
Yes. So you can follow me at Officially Bougie LLC. That is my business name, but I connect with a whole bunch of people there. This is on Instagram and on Facebook. And you can also follow me at Tasneek on Instagram and Facebook. So I am on both platforms. I do tend to talk about my Christian side of things on my personal account than my actual business. But if you guys have any questions or even want to reach out to me about maybe you might be in a situation where you're in a sorority and you have been feeling the power of God, you know, you can always reach out to me, and always think about it. If it's a gut feeling, then we know that that's the Lord trying to tell us something. If it's a gut feeling, that's God. That's the Holy Spirit tugging on your gut. And he's letting you know, like, hey, there's something not right with this type of organization, or there's something not right with these things. So definitely.
Everyone, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.